Good evening, everyone. 7:32 Wednesday. We are in business session tonight. We'll do the pledge and then we will get into a very exciting meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. You want to do announcements? We'll start with you, Dana.
Okay, I just wanted to let people know that tomorrow, Mike Risco Music is having a 30th anniversary celebration. That's right, they've been our music ambassadors for 3 decades, and they're going to have a celebration at their store on Croton Avenue tomorrow from 6 to 9. And there's going to be food, music, giveaways, an open jam, and more. So it's open to the public, and check it out. Congratulations, Risco's.
You want to do your plug?
Oh, mic's off.
Oh no, missed it.
Go Yankees.
You have anything? You're gonna do an echo of that? Okay. I thought the two of you would do it in stereo. Okay,
It's the pregame.
so we have a full agenda. I don't think we have exec meeting tonight. And Bob Fritchie, trustee Fritchie, is coming to us. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm doing good, actually. Thanks. I go actually, what's today? Yesterday was 2 weeks. I'm up and moving,
Good.
walking around. And I actually go to the surgeon tomorrow to have everything cleaned up.
Great. Looking forward to having you back at our long table. And Maddie Sahaj, who is scheduled to be doing a pretty interesting session with us, is not feeling at her 100%, which is highly unusual. She's coming in Zoom, but the village manager will have to pitch hit. We'll see if she does as well as Maddie usually does.
Well, actually, Maddie and I had a discussion, and Maddie's going to present, but I'm
Because
gonna-
Maddie doesn't trust you to do as good of a job.
I'm
Let's be
sure
honest.
that I can't.
Okay.
So that she really worked really hard
Okay.
on this. But before her presentation, I do have something. If we're ready to start,
Yes.
we've had a rough week. People have a lot of issues, and Dale is out dealing with some personal issues. But I did tell her that I would discuss her memo that she sent to the board. It really is just preparing you for resolutions that will be on next week, that will adjust capital projects to reflect their true cost, and the closing of some completed projects that we did in 2025 that will allow us to move some money around to for places where we went over, where we're under. They'll be adjusted to the reduced cost on the closed projects. But basically, it 5 resolutions. One is specific to the Spring Street sidewalk project that Paul discussed the other week. So we went through the funding allocation for that. So that's to rename that project and increase the total funding commensurate with what we now know the total cost of the job will be. The other one is for various DI. There'll be several resolutions, but really dealing with the DRI projects that we had to readjust. So moving money from the multimodal for the multimodal site from the Market Square project and the Station Plaza streetscaping, and those resolutions will be in there so that those projects are reflected at the new costs, as well as a final adjustment to improvements for the community center. And this is going back to adjust projects that were done in 2022, you might recall. And most notably the pool project too, so that making adjustments so that we can close those jobs out. But the impact on the budget is net neutral. So all of these will be on next week. If there's any specific questions, I'm happy to entertain them. And if I can't answer them, we will get Dale to answer it via email over the next day or so. But I think I probably can answer most questions if there are any.
So I appreciate you bringing this to us, and we'll be looking at it at a legislative session. Pat probably has some questions. I think if you went through it, before you do that, just on the overview, we have a lot of big projects. You know, in my head, we have $150 million worth of projects going on. Depending on how you count them, it's anywhere from 9 to about 24. When I started as a trustee, one of these projects took up hours of conversation because it was a big deal to do a project. So we're moving at a really fast pace. I say this for the people who watch us, you know, in their spare time, and also for the record, which I like to do, is that we sometimes conflate projects, initiatives, and what I call BAU, being, you know, business as usual, which really refers to just the streets, the water, paving, you know, the basic stuff. That's 80% of the time, actually. So, you know, as we move forward, especially into next year, we're going to have to be very clear of which parking lot we're talking about, which initiative. You know, a water main and water plant are two different things. You know, the building department conversation tonight is going to be a complicated conversation. I'm looking at you guys because I think that's why you're here. The money is one aspect of it, customer service, and then some of the other pieces. So we do want to take a breath every once in a while and make sure that all the trustees are lined up with what we're doing, because I think we're closer to it than the public is. And we just are going to have to get better also with communicating each individual project and how they all fit into a 360-degree sort of model around the village. So this, these really bring together a number of different projects in the DRI. It's not one project. It's 2 or 3 of them. And so we'll be specific next week in explaining exactly how we're moving monies around.
Right.
That is a net neutral. I mean, nobody's saying they're spending more money. They're just moving money from one capital project to the next. Sir.
So appreciate all the detail. I guess, but my only question has to do with the adjustment 2025 computer center roof replacement project, where it goes from 1.2 to 500, whatever,
So
560,000.
so
That's a big drop.
Rare occurrences where something comes in way under budget. And in this case, we had budgeted $1.2 million for the replacement of the community center roof, and the lowest responsible bid came in at $558,300. So that was good.
It's like an eclipse once in 10 years.
So we were able to reallocate $500,000 of that funding towards of the $41,700 remaining. 500 was reallocated to go towards the multimodal site to offset those increases, and 141,700 went to the community center improvements, which we did have a job that went over budget. The pool renovation did go over budget. So that's where we were able to capture the underage, you know, or the under budget items to offset that. So.
Thanks. Thank you. That was it.
You knew that though, right? You knew where it came from. Okay.
So, but I do think it's important that the people know that every now and then a job comes in under budget, and we were able to do that job. There were some hiccups with the manufacturer and making sure that everything worked right, but it's all correct. Everything was corrected. It was maybe extended the time a little bit, but the job was done under budget and relatively on time, and all the guarantees are in place going forward. So,
well, I think we all learned that all these construction, it's no different than doing your house. I've yet to do anything on a house where it goes exactly as predicted. So there's always some surprises. You hope they'll be minor. So I think it's expected, and I'm glad people caught it, and that it's going, it's a net neutral at the end of the day. Okay,
Okay, so next item on the agenda is and I want to frame this that this is something that the Board of Trustees has requested, and we put a lot of time and thought into this presentation, and Maddie's done a great job working with her team. We have Joe Augustinelli, our building inspector, and Greg Gross, our senior code enforcement officer here tonight. A lot goes on in the building department, and Maddie will go into this in detail. But a lot goes into this, and I don't think that we've done a particularly good job at consistently bringing the board up to speed with the many, many, many things that go on there. And it's a challenging department because just today we found a single family home that was doing work without a permit, extensive work without a permit, even though the owner had told us nothing was going on. This is not necessarily the norm, but it does happen, and it's not always easy to identify these issues. And when we do identify them, Maddie will take you through specifically what the action steps are and what the consequences are and how we're working with people so most people know when they may need to get a permit, because it's not always clear, but we try to get that information out, and the value of getting that permit and working with the building department, because it really is truly the goal of the department to work with people to facilitate safe construction and protect homeowners and property owners and residents and renters from anything that could be done. Did it just cut out?
I'll get you another one. Got it? Let's see if this one works.
Anyway, with that, I'd like to turn this over to Maddie, and if she gets too tired, I'll pick up the slack. But if the board has questions, Maddie will go through the presentation, but we are looking for also board feedback and input on how we can better communicate the many things that are happening in the building department.
Gentlemen, why don't you come and join us? There's 2 mics. Don't be strangers. You have an extra stand
Yeah, I'll take that down.
because you're,
Oh,
okay, Maddie?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, board. Hi, Joe. Hi, Greg. I know that Sonia Tanksley, who is our deputy corporation counsel and also serves as prosecutor, who works closely with this team, had a conflict tonight, but she should be there shortly. So hopefully she'll be able to join in on this discussion. But just to sort of echo what Karen said, we really appreciate the board giving us an opportunity to sort of communicate some of the nuts and bolts of what we work on every day, not only to the board, but also to the public. This presentation is a little wordier than my presentations typically are, but that's by design. We want this to be able to sort of work as a standalone presentation, not only via YouTube, but also as a standalone document, so that if folks have questions, they can refer back to this, and we can make this a series if the board finds that the format is helpful. So Jamie, if you could get started on the first slide, please.
So, Maddie?
Yes,
How do you want to set this up? Do you want to do the presentation we ask at the end?
good point.
Or you're
Good
going to
point.
stop at certain points?
It would be helpful to hold questions to the end, if at all possible, just to kind of make sure, because I think, some things may come up repeatedly in the presentation. So if it's something that's mentioned, the answer might come a little bit later than you might anticipate. So I would ask that questions wait till the end if at all possible. So sort of zooming out, we have really two departments in one when we talk about the building department. So certainly our building inspector serves as, you know, the lead of the department working for building inspection and also code enforcement. Not pictured here is also the planning department, which, as folks may know, we have one full-time person designated for planning board and zoning board and land use board activities. Our planning clerk, Jamie Kane. We also work with Valerie's firm, Nelson Pope Voorhees, and Valerie serves as our consultant planner. So I would be remiss if I didn't call out their important role. But today we're talking pretty specifically about building and code. So I'll direct your eyes to the right-hand side of the screen. We have 9 full-time slots allocated to the building and code enforcement function. We have a building inspector. We have 1 assistant building inspector. We have 3 full-time clerical positions. We have a senior code enforcement officer. We have 2 code enforcement officer Spanish speaking roles, and then we have a vacancy that we're looking to fill at this very moment. This is a 4th code enforcement position that has never been filled before. This is something that the board put into the budget for us a couple of years ago. And for a variety of reasons, we've had some difficulty filling, but this will be a first for us. So thank you again to the board for making that funding available. As you'll hear during this presentation, it'll certainly go a long way. On the left-hand side of the screen, also myself and Sonia Tanksley, as I mentioned, who serves as Deputy Corp Counsel, but also our prosecutor, works very, very closely with this team. I put it at about 50% of her time. She's a part-time employee and 50% of my time as a full-time employee. Next slide, please.
Ooh.
So this is one of those slides where I'm going to give you some information at the top and then we'll dig into it a little bit further at the bottom. But basically just to give an umbrella scope of what it is that these departments do every single day. It's a lot more than what the average person might anticipate. And it's certainly a lot more than someone like me who grew up here, knew about the building department before I started working for the village and with this team directly. So what people typically think about is building permits, inspections, plan review, and that's about it. But there's actually a lot more to what we do on the administrative side, certainly, and then also field work. So if you take a look at the different groupings on the left-hand side, these are some of the data points that we keep in the office. You can see they're grouped by function. So at the top, FOIL requests received and answered, as well as title searches. Those are done administratively. Basically, FOIL requests and title searches are things that when folks are looking to, you know, perhaps put their property on the market or thinking about buying a property, they will come to the building department and ask us to do that research for them. Just a plug, which we'll hear a couple times during this presentation. A lot of the information for properties in the village of Ossining can be found online at City Squared. So while you can certainly put in a FOIL and we're happy to help you, if you need something right away, you can get it on a dime by going to that website in many cases. The next section has to do with, you know, sort of the lower level permits, ones that are largely administrative or ones that are pretty quick for us to turn around in the office. So I'm sure, you know, this board has talked a lot over the past couple of years about vacant properties, about tree removal. We also process electrical permits. We don't have an electrical inspector on staff. So typically we coordinate with the electric inspection agencies, of which there are 3 in Westchester County, to process those. But we sort of have a very specific way that we need those inspections done so that it's to the satisfaction of the building inspector. Then the next section are things that are a little bit more advanced and typically are the building inspector or the assistant building inspector doing those reviews and inspections. Then we have the clerk's office works with us on refreshment, parklet, outdoor cafe. 3-year fire inspections are for commercial properties, which are what we'd all think of as commercial properties, a deli, a grocery store, but also commercial is residential properties of 3 units or more. So basically anything that's not a 2 or 1 family house is considered commercial, even if every unit in it is a residential unit. So we get into those units. We aspire to once every 3 years to conduct a fire inspection. And basically in a nutshell, that's looking to make sure that not only do all units and living spaces have ingress and egress, but also that all smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors are in place, and that there are no obvious obstructions from, you know, allowing folks to enter and exit safely. Then we have where we start to get into the meat and potatoes of the building department. Building inspections conducted and then amended plans reviewed. So like I said, we'll get back to that data point after we explain what those terms mean a little bit later. But then finally, the thing that probably everybody watching, listening, or who knows anything about Ossining's building department is what do we do with all of this information, right? What do we do when something goes wrong? So an order to remedy, or an OTR, is basically what happens when something in the system has gone wrong. Either someone didn't apply for a permit initially, or they applied for a permit and are doing work outside of that permit, or something has gone wrong in the process. But I do want to emphasize, as I will several times in this presentation, and as Karen sort of led with, our goal here is to write like not that many OTRs. Our goal is to get compliance. And often the process of OTR gives folks a 30-day window to solve what it is that's happening on the property that shouldn't be. It is our goal that that OTR never makes it to a court appearance ticket. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Something that's not listed on here is that we also work with the village water department to administer the backflow program for village properties. If there are any questions on that, I'm sure that Greg and Joe can speak about it much more intelligently than I. But we have one of our full-timers in the office dedicates probably between 25 and 50% of her time working on that function very specifically. And that's something that's mandated by Westchester County. Westchester County comes and does an audit for us once a year, and we pass with flying colors each year. But there's always something new that they're asking for. So every year we sort of have to adapt our process for what it is that they're looking for. But I want to just give props to Lori McDonald and also her liaisons in DPW who make sure that she gets the right information to complete that process. Jamie, next slide, please. So let's talk about the first thing I mentioned, which is sort of the meat and potatoes of this conversation, building permits. So we've sort of broken it down into 3 different buckets of building permits that someone might come and apply for. So someone's coming to do some sort of work on their property, and they have to complete a permit for many of those activities. So the first bucket is a basic permit. So an operating permit, that's basically for something like a gas station or a maintenance garage, something that has state regulations around the kind of chemicals that they're using, or, you know, very highly safety sensitive processes that they undergo. And we need to make sure that we have all of the documentation to make sure that they're operating safely. Business occupancy is a one-time thing. You're starting a new business in the village of Ossining. We just need to know who you are and what it is that you're there to do. And in some cases, if it's something that's governed by the Department of Health, we just need to see that the Department of Health has given you permission to be doing that activity in that space. Plumbing, mechanical, tree, sign permit, and also electrical. These are things that we can turn around pretty quickly. These are not, usually very advanced applications. Often plumbing, mechanical are tied to a building permit application, so they sort of come in secondarily. But tree removal, sign permit, it's pretty straightforward, and we can usually spin those around inside of 1 week. I added 2 weeks for the trees because at this point, and this is something that we'll be coming to the board with in December, we don't have an arborist on staff. Not many places do, and we use a consultant arborist. We try to bundle her visits here into the village of Ossining so as to not have to increase the fee for the tree removal permit. So that might take a little bit longer. We try to get her in at least once a week, which she's a single shingle. We can often do, but not always. So that's why the tree ones take a little bit longer. But certainly, if it's an emergency tree removal permit, we can move much more quickly than that. The second bucket is medium. So it's something that takes a little bit more effort, a little bit more of Joe's time to review. But basically, this is anything that's going on with a single or 2 family home, whether it's construction from whole cloth, an addition, or a renovation. That takes a little bit longer, but usually not very long, 2 to 4 weeks once revision lists are satisfied. This is something super, super important that I want to highlight. Often when someone puts in an application to the building department and they submit their plans, hardly anybody gets it right on the first try. I know I certainly wouldn't. And sometimes there are things that we still need. So we'll send a letter pretty quickly to say you also need your contractor's insurance, or there's detail missing for the footings on the deck, an itemized list. Oftentimes, once we send out that revision list, people forget about us. And that's completely understandable. You feel like you submitted your permit application and you should be off to the races. Unfortunately, we can't complete our step until you've completed yours. So it's really, really important to look out for those revision lists and stay on top of it. We can't get started until we have everything we need to complete the permit. So I just want a public service announcement that one a little bit. Those reviews, though, are completed in-house. So Joe's the one who's doing those reviews. So you have somebody that you can call, you can ask. And again, that turnaround time, once those revision lists are satisfied, is usually between 2 and 4 weeks. Finally, we have the large kind of applications, which are commercial, multifamily, or where land use approvals are required. So we work very closely not only with the planning department, but also with our land use board and boards and chairs. We have a planning board, a zoning board of appeals, a historic preservation committee, and the environmental advisory committee. So oftentimes, depending on for the HPC, what neighborhood you're in, or sometimes the EAC, or what it is that you're contemplating doing on a site, you need land use approvals before we can even talk about getting you a permit. So that will automatically put you into the large size bucket. Doesn't matter what sort of project it is that you're doing. So the turnaround time for that one is a little bit longer, and there's a good reason for that. Often this is something that we send out, depending on the nature of the project. It could be something that we ask the applicant to put in a small amount of escrow to cover the cost of that review, or sometimes it's something that just by nature is something that we just want to send out because we want to expedite it, and it's something that's going to take a little bit longer than a single or two family home. So those are the three different buckets of the permits. So when we go into the next flow chart, you'll sort of see how these once you've put in the permit and once we're ready to go, how those all come together. So next slide, please. So before we get to the flow chart, there's sort of another public service announcement here about the purpose of getting a permit. Certainly, if you're looking to have a project done at your home or your business, you got a million other things going on. We completely understand that this feels like an added barrier to you getting what you need done. We understand that. Unfortunately, it's the law. But we're happy to sort of stick with you and hold your hand through it, because at the end, it's not only better for us in the village because we know that your property is built correctly, it's also better for your investment. So I know when I have said this in a couple of conversations internally, specifically the second slide, building inspectors and code enforcement officials are a property owner's best friend. That gets kind of a chuckle. But I really do sincerely believe that. And I think if you ask Joe or Greg or anyone on their team, they would say the same thing. We always lead with the foot of safety. We're not trying to bang anybody over the head and it's not a cash grab. We want to make sure that if you're paying a contractor that you're getting your money's worth. We're very happy to work with you to make sure that you're doing things within the code, and happy to sort of be your in-house experts on things of that nature. So you don't have to sweat when you see us coming. We're here to help. The building codes that we operate under exist for a reason. It's not just the Village of Ossining, but also New York State wants to make sure that you and your family and your tenants and your employees are safe when they're on your property. And that's a feather in everyone's cap, and we're here to make sure that happens. I would also say that our permit fees are very reasonable. So certainly inexpensive when you compare it to the cost of you have your whole crew set up on the site and then you're issued a stop work order. That's certainly not an expense anybody wants to take on. Having to undo the work and then redo it, that's a nightmare. And then perhaps if you've done work without a permit, then we have to charge you an enhanced permit fee. We may need to take you to court. These are all things that we don't particularly want to do. You saw the slide earlier. We have a finite amount of people working in this department for a community upwards of probably 30,000 people. So it's in everyone's best interest that we go through the process here, and we'll try to make it as painless as possible. So again, our goal is compliance. We want to work with you to get it right. And it's not just about you and your property. We also live in a community. So it's not just about what happens at your house. And while we, respect everyone's right to their own property, you also live in a neighborhood. And, you think about if something was happening at the house across the street, is that something you would like to look at? Is that something that you would want to be, near you? And, the liability is on everybody at that point. Next slide, please. All right, so here's sort of a very, very oversimplified flow chart of what happens when someone files for a building permit. So starting at the upper left-hand side, the round areas are what the applicant is doing, and then the square is what the municipality is doing. So someone comes in and they're submitting a building permit. Everything that we do is online now. So you can go to City Square to submit everything that you need. And then the building inspector is going to give it a cursory review. So if he determines in that cursory review that it needs to go to a land use board, we're hitting the stop button. we can't issue a permit yet. You've got to go through the next couple of steps. And this is something that I will give great praise to Joe and also to Valerie Monastra for ensuring that we stick to. I understand that in the past, there have been a couple different access doors to get into land use boards. We have it pretty down that everybody's going through City Squared now to initiate the process. And they'll get, if they need to go to a land use board, what we call a referral letter. So a referral letter basically says like, stop, I can't give you a permit. Here's your referral to the land use boards and here's what you need from them. So for example, I'm referring you to the planning board because you need site plan approval. I'm referring you to the zoning board because you need these 3 area variances, so on and so forth. So that letter goes out, then it's incumbent on the applicant to then submit to those land use boards. And that's where Jamie Kane comes in, sort of carries the ball forward from here. The applicant secures all of their land use approvals, they get their resolution, and then they're applying again for the same permit. Now Joe sees it, he knows that those approvals are in place, and now he can continue his process. So he's going to undergo a detailed code review. If everything's in line and if all the revision lists are complied with, he's going to issue a permit with a list of inspections that need to happen. So that might be footing, that might be insulation, that might be any number of things. It is incumbent on the property owner to call for those inspections as the work proceeds. So what we really want to discourage is folks getting too far ahead of themselves. And then we're in a position where we can't inspect the work you've done because you've already covered it up with drywall. We try to make ourselves as available as we can. I know that folks, would prefer to have same day inspection. We would prefer that also, but unfortunately, sometimes that's not possible. So you need to bear with us a little bit. But what I would recommend is if you think you're going to be ready for framing in 4 days, call us now. And say, hey, I think on Friday I'm going to need my framing. Can you squeeze me in? We're happy to accommodate if and when we can, but longer notice is better for everybody. We know that you're working to a deadline, and we want to try to accommodate you whenever possible. So that being said, assuming that all the work is done, according to the approved plans, a certificate of occupancy is issued and then the permit is closed. So that's good news. When someone, goes to sell their property and you look online, you can find all the details about the property or go through a FOIL search. You're going to see that, Joe Schmo took out a permit in October 2025 to build this addition, but that permit is closed, which means whoever's buying the property can safely know that all the inspections have been covered and they're ready to buy that property unencumbered. Next slide, please. So inspecting the unexpected, a very wise woman that works with us always said, it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And that has stuck with me for a very long time. We know that in the course of a project, these things can be very, very complicated. Even if it's as simple as a bathroom renovation, sometimes things come up. In Ossining, we have a lot of properties that, the houses haven't been touched in quite some time. They're quite a bit older. And we all know that once you start poking around behind the walls, you might get a couple surprises. That's to be expected, certainly. But it's crucial that whatever you end up building matches the plans that we have in our hot little hands. It's really important. So if something is happening in the field and you find something you're not anticipating, or something goes awry and you need to pivot, please let us know right away. The building inspector will come out and he can determine whether it's something that's going to require what the fee schedule calls an amended plan fee. So basically that means Joe has spent his due diligence sitting with your plans for an hour or two, looking to make sure that everything is to code, village and state and fire. But now you've decided that you need to change the shape of a window or you need to move it to the other side of the room. If he needs to go in and re-review that plan, depending on how great a change it is that you're contemplating making, it might take quite some time to re-review that plan. Something that may seem simple, like, oh, I'm just making the window a little bit smaller, or I'm just moving the closet, to the left instead of the right, might markedly change the livability of the space. It might, trigger something else in the fire code. So those are going to need to be reviewed again. So it can't be an instantaneous process. For that reason, we require a 25% amended plan fee. The good news is twofold. One, that keeps you on the line. So it's not like, okay, now I have to go all the way back to the bottom of the pile and wait for everybody else's application to filter through. we are aware of the fact that you're already in the middle of a job and you have expenses and overhead and you need to get this out the door. So it sort of keeps your place in the queue. But something else that we want to encourage is it's 25% of the permit fee that you took out. So if you were doing a $1,000 renovation, 25% is a sizable amount of money, certainly. And again, as I mentioned, some of these properties that we deal with on a regular basis are very, very old. So, you uncover one problem and it's the first of many. What we would like to encourage is let us know right away if you have an amendment, but we only want to charge you the 25% one time at the end. We don't want to charge you again and again and again. So let us know as soon as there's an issue, but in terms of squaring up, let's get your project done first, and then we'll worry about the squaring up. This has come up a couple of times and we've been able to accommodate. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware, while there is an amended permit fee, because it does take us more time, we're not looking to charge it, to you ad nauseum. We only want to charge it to you once, even if it means you have multiple times that you need to fix something. So that's something that we're really looking to push forward as sort of our, mission of improving customer service and making sure that projects can end on time. Next slide, please. So the role of code enforcement, you have with you tonight, Senior Code Enforcement Officer Extraordinaire, Greg Gross. Greg has been with the village for, I think, 8 years or thereabouts. And Greg is I don't want to gas him up too much, but Greg is an expert. Greg really has, grabbed this role with both hands, and he's had the opportunity to train a couple of people coming in who are not from this industry at all. And he sort of made them in his image, and that's a huge benefit to us. Because Greg is really a great example of how to do things the right way in an industry where it can be really easy to do things the wrong way. So I want to just make sure I give him his props for that. That being said, at the moment, our team of code enforcement officers has gone from 3 to 1. Greg's holding it down for the last couple of months because of some staffing issues unforeseen that we've had, which will hopefully be resolved very soon. But he's got an awful lot on his plate. And even if everybody were here, they would still have an awful lot on their plate. Some of the things that they're doing on a daily basis, the first one is patrol. And I know that that's something that we've been working on, is being more visible out in the community. We have the branding of our vehicles. We want people to know that we're around, not in a Big Brother way, but that, we're keeping our finger on the pulse. We have an idea of what sort of work is going on in the community. Also investigating complaints and follow-ups. We get a lot of phone calls that people say, hey, I want to remain anonymous, but my neighbor's doing something crazy, and I'm pretty sure that he's not allowed to be doing it, and it doesn't look safe. We take a lot of those complaints, and every single complaint is followed up on. So, if another PSA, if you want to, register a concern, you can remain anonymous. But rest assured that we will follow up to make sure that, what you're seeing is something that's either against the rules and we'll do something about it, or is perfectly fine. They also issue stop work and uninhabitable orders. So if we have a unit that needs to be placarded, one of the code enforcement officers will be in the process of doing a routine fire inspection, and they might see some conditions that they just can't turn a blind eye. They can't wait for the court to go through the process. We need everybody out right away. They can issue those uninhabitable orders. Orders to remedy, what we talked about a little bit earlier on, and we'll get to in a little bit more detail, but basically it's a warning of sorts. It's basically a 30-day warning in most cases to tell people there's a deficiency in the work that you're doing or on your property. You have 30 days. Here's exactly the code language that draws us to this conclusion. And then the code enforcement officer who wrote that OTR is then responsible for converting it to a court appearance ticket. They're also responsible to keep their own court appearance records. So every code enforcement officer has a roster of, I'm not sure at this point, probably between 20 and 100 cases that are sort of ongoing. And so every, time they meet with the prosecutor, they need to be able to indicate, where that particular applicant is in their process. Have they gotten a permit? Have they, allowed us in for an inspection? And that's sort of the next bullet. So working, certainly with Stuart, our corporation counsel, and Sonia, our prosecutor, we've implemented a once a week meeting. This meeting is like I don't allow myself to skip it. It's one of those things that, everyone has to clear their calendar. This is something we take very seriously. It's a meeting where we sit around, and not only do we go over the court calendar for the coming week, if in fact there is one, but we go through every order to remedy that's been written in the past week. And that's for a variety of reasons. The first reason is because we had a lot of new folks on the team, and we wanted to make sure we were sort of drilling into everybody. This is a standard operating procedure. This is how we want things written, and to get that sort of consistency in the writing. But it has developed into something that, I don't want to be corny, but that's like kind of really beautiful. We've found a really fantastic way to sort of workshop not only the exactly how it is that we're going to mechanically write out some of these orders to remedy, but also philosophically, like, why are we writing this? Like, what is the basis behind, what it is that we're looking to correct or change in our community? And is the legislation that we're working with written in such a way that allows us to do that? Or do we need to recommend, perhaps that the Board of Trustees, make a tweak? Because we're driven by the mission, not by the text of the code. So, sort of trying to reimagine, how it could be that the language could be more helpful to us in sort of checking the boxes that I know the board wants to see checked. And then, if they have time, performing inspections, refreshment licenses, which are necessary. They go through the clerk's office to make sure that if you're serving, I think it's anything but water on premise, you need to have a refreshment license, as well as sidewalk cafes and parklets. And then, as I mentioned earlier, fire inspection permits. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes things go wrong. It could be that somebody is doing work without a permit. Sometimes that happens. People don't know that, whatever it is that they're, planning to do requires a permit. Or, as is often the case, and as people tell our code enforcement officers, I didn't think anyone was working today, or I thought I would be in and out in an hour and you guys wouldn't have caught me. That being said, if you are observed doing something that you shouldn't be doing without a permit, or working outside of a permit you do have, you're going to get a violation. And again, a violation is in most cases just sort of like a warning letter, but basically it's documented that you've done something you're not supposed to be doing, and those are the sort of the documents that we workshop around the table on the mornings when we have those meetings. But once you get that, you have 30 days to correct the violation. And again, I say in most cases because there are a couple exceptions to that. So let's say the person calls us up right away, because that's what you're supposed to do. There's the building department's phone number, and it says, if you want to correct this order to remedy, give us a call. So they call the building department and they say, I'm really sorry, I didn't realize, how do I fix this? So it could be that what you've been caught doing is in violation of the zoning code. That makes this a little bit more complicated, because then you might have to go to the zoning board of appeals and get a variance for the work that you were in the middle of doing, that you just recently completed doing, or that you were trying to do. If that's the case, then you obviously have to go through that whole process that we spoke about earlier. But if it's not the case, you can skip right to the permitting process if it's something that would have required a permit, and basically you're going to be legalizing the work that you did. So once that permit is approved, or if no permits are necessary, you can get back to work. You're going to call for your inspections. The issuing officer comes back to the property. We close the OTR. Everyone goes on with their lives. No muss, no fuss. That happens often. I'm not going to say that never happens, but unfortunately, we do have many occasions where people do not follow that. So often we won't hear from anybody for that 30 days. The condition continues, and then the OTR has to be converted into what's called a court appearance ticket. So when that happens, it gets added to the court calendar. Now Sonia and Stuart have to get involved. Now we're actually prosecuting a ticket against the property owner. The property owner receives a notice from the court. They're supposed to come into court. The prosecutor is looking for compliance again, and we will get compliance eventually. There's no question about it. If we're doing it in a local court, the new process that we are looking to move towards and have in some cases is conditional discharge. That basically means if we have your word that you're going to get your property into compliance, we'll basically take you off the court calendar, and we can forget this ever happened. But if you don't, then that's the condition. Then a fine is going to be applied. And again, we're going to end up getting compliance one way or the other. Sometimes we have to take it to a higher court, which we can do at our discretion. They're the ones who can make you immediately comply. So that's sort of the life cycle. But again, the most critical takeaway from this entire conversation is look at all of these steps it takes for us to get you into compliance if you're not. It's a lot of work for 9 people and 2 part-time people. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it makes for bad feelings. We would really rather not. So to the degree possible, we would really like to work with you to get compliance. If you call up the building department when you get an OTR and say, I had no idea, and listen, guys, I'm really going through it, I didn't know, and this is what's going on. As long as you're willing to work with us, you get an architect on board, a design professional, you're showing some momentum, we can work with you. Because again, the goal is for everyone to be safe and for you to, go on with your life or your business. Our goal is not to charge you fees and tie you up in court. So I really just want to underscore that fact. Compliance is what we're looking for ultimately, but coming to us after the fact is discouraged, and that is likely when you're going to end up with higher fees that you're not going to be happy with us about. Next slide, please. So this is super exciting and something that we haven't talked about in a while. Back in 2022, the village set up the Code Enforcement Task Force, which was a group of folks from a couple different departments. So not only building and code, but also our emergency responders, the fire department, the police department. I believe OVAC at one point was involved, DPW, sanitation, the water department, our parks department. And they basically did, a couple loops around neighborhoods where we were seeing a lot of these OTRs violations to basically say, like, what are some key indicators that different departments might notice that could sort of help us to correct some of these issues. So everybody looks at a property from a different perspective, and building and code, maybe we're getting to the point where, they were seeing the same things over and over again, that someone from DPW or sanitation might see a different indicator on the site that would imply that something was going on that needed to be remedied. So we learned a lot from those tours, and a lot of those things are sort of now commonplace in the way that we operate the departments. One of the things should have been sort of an easy one, but something that we probably needed to tighten up a little bit was uniforms. Now everybody has very, very clearly branded clothing that lets folks know they're here from building department, code enforcement, and also the same with our vehicles. We want folks to know who we are. We don't want it to be any surprises. We've also worked closely with our new sanitation foreman to issue sanitation tickets directly. So if the crew is out 7 o'clock in the morning and they see that someone's put trash out on the wrong day, or they see that someone's property is in a state of disarray, rather than calling Joe or Greg to say, hey, you want to check out 123 Main Street, they can just write the ticket. I know that in many cases, especially if it's someone who's not a chronic offender, they'll go up to the door and just say, hey, just so you know, you have your stuff out on a wrong day. If this happens again, I'm going to need to write you. And people voluntarily comply, no problem. But the fact that now sanitation has the ability to do that on their own, skips a step for us and makes it a little bit more turnkey. The coordination between those departments continues. Certainly, Greg is in touch with DPW on a regular basis about things that they're seeing out in the community. Thanks to the board, we also deployed a fleet of Big Belly trash cans, which I know we also haven't talked about in a little while. Something that was happening around COVID is where it really spiked. We were seeing a big issue with folks, especially in the downtown area, putting household garbage out on the street. And there was a variety of reasons for that, but basically using the Big Bellies, and because of the way that the drawer mechanism works, you're not actually able to put large garbage into those garbage cans. And this has been sort of a self-policing issue too. I think there's been a handful of times that we've noticed that people have put bags next to the Big Bellies, but more often than not, we're not really seeing the street trash the way that we used to. And that's definitely helped with a lot of the complaints that we get about things that may have ended up being sanitation tickets. Coordination with OPD on serious health and safety violations. Again, unfortunately, sometimes things are just really in a state that we can't wait for the 30-day process to bear out, and folks are immediately in danger, and we need to work with law enforcement to encourage folks that the property needs to be vacated. Not something that we relish, certainly, but something that again is for everybody's good. And then finally, updates to the zoning code that allow for more effective building and code enforcement. So again, things that we've seen, sort of as patterns in the community that people might not be doing anything wrong, but just the way that our zoning is set up is no longer conducive to the way that folks in that neighborhood, are choosing to live. And we can make a decision. Do we want to do something legislatively about that, or do we want to find another avenue to address it? So sort of a comprehensive approach overall, working with all of these departments is something really great that's come out of the Code Enforcement Task Force, and something that we hope to continue. We have been working more closely. I mentioned Roland, who's our amazing DPW sanitation foreman, but also community service worker Bateman out of the Ossining Police Department has been fantastic in just being that extra set of eyes for us. She's getting, schooled up on some of the local codes that she's able to write, but working with Greg and his team to sort of learn about how she can advise local businesses before an OTR is issued. Hey, you really can't have that out on the sidewalk. Or, hey, did you know that you need a temporary sign permit for that sign? Here's how you get one. So trying to sort of install some of these ombudsmen in the community also to sort of apply a softer touch when at all possible, and also be a conduit of information. We're hearing from a lot of businesses that this is not working for them. Maybe there's something else that we should try. Next slide, please. So Karen and I have sort of continued that conversation since 2022 in a really important way. We've been working closely with some of our counterparts from like-minded communities who are experiencing very similar issues, because what we've learned more and more and more is, as much as we feel that Ossining is unique, and of course it is in a lot of ways, Ossining is really not unique in this regard. This is a regional issue, dare I say a statewide or a national issue, but certainly something that is, because of the high cost of housing in this region, is something that we're seeing across Westchester, and the communities that have always been a little bit more densely developed. That's certainly the first indicator, but even our neighboring communities that have never seen this before are starting to report some of the things that we've been seeing for years. It's just sort of a symptom of what's going on economically for folks at a national level. But something that we really have to work on here to the degree that it's possible for us to move the needle. What everybody is also saying that they're seeing is the overcrowding, particularly in the single and two family homes. This, I'm hoping, will sort of help us to reinvigorate the discussion around the rental registry, which, as the board may remember, was something that was passed late last year. We are hitting some roadblocks with the implementation of that. Which we can talk about in greater detail, but basically the rental registry was imagined as a way to sort of combat this. As I mentioned, it's 3 or more units where we're able to regularly get access, and folks have gotten wise to that. So in 1 and 2 family homes is where, when we get these complaints and when we're able to get access, we're seeing that overcrowding is becoming more of an issue. So that's something we can talk about, either in a different conversation or after this presentation is done. Certainly staff capacity is something that's been a challenge for us. We're working through it. We also were talking about trying to get a New York State code certification for some of our fire officials. New York State code certification is required for anybody who needs to write state code violations, which in Ossining, about a year ago, we actually moved most of our local codes into the state code, or vice versa. But basically now we're writing state codes instead of local codes, which is great for efficiency's sake. But unfortunately, it means now you need the certification to write those tickets. So trying to encourage other folks to get that certification has proven to not be as easy. And then finally, an issue that I can confidently say is statewide, because we hear about a lot of our rural community partners upstate having this same issue. Chronically vacant buildings that are paying their taxes. So it's not like it's an abandoned building. The definition of abandoned is like no one's paying taxes and no one's maintaining. If someone's paying taxes, and often it's a bank, not a person, there is very little that we can do. I know this is something that we've been working on in fits and starts with the vacant property registry, which has been pretty successful, trying to make sure that the buildings comport to some sort of standard, to make sure that they don't look like crazy haunted houses. But to date, that's pretty much been the best that we can do. that is not satisfying as a member of the public to see a building that, you know, could be generating taxes, could be bringing in foot traffic, and that might be described as an eyesore sitting fallow for a very long time. It's not very satisfying to hear, well, there's really nothing we can do about that. It's a statewide issue. So we continue to, you know, sort of work with our other partners in Westchester to come up with a policy agenda that we can then bring back to this board, and they can do likewise. To sort of see how we can push at the state level to you know, get some momentum here. So in Port Chester, Mount Kisco, Tarrytown, and Sleepy Hollow, we have been meeting quarterly. And again, we're hitting the same notes. They've had some great ideas. Specifically the conditional discharge was something that came out of Port Chester. So hopefully we'll be able to see that bear fruit, thanks to their efforts. But again, they're struggling with a lot of the same challenges. The good news about that, though, is that we have some very vocal partners, who have a great interest in getting this done right alongside us. I'll wrap this up by saying we know that internally we also have some work to do. So outside from, you know, the global environment that we find ourselves in, there are places that we can make incremental change and that we plan to. Filling vacant positions, as I mentioned earlier, we have one vacant position currently. Continuing to reinforce that interdepartmental collaboration. Sharing best practices, employing technology where possible, and then publishing notices of frequent offenders. This is something that has been discussed for at least 2 years, and we were just thinking of exactly the right way to do it. But I think we're at the point where we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good any longer. So I had shared with the board a memo of exactly what that format may look like going forward. So happy to ask questions about that. But basically, we want to make sure that not only is some public pressure applied to people who are knowingly continuing to disobey the law, but also for folks who might otherwise be renting an apartment in that space, at least they have forewarning of what it is that they're walking into. Because right now, you know, there's really no venue for folks to get, you know, information unless they know someone who already lives in a complex or rents from that landlord. So a couple of places we've already improved based on our learnings from the board, and what you all would like to see. We are completely online. We have coverage on Saturdays. The phone tree has been a particular challenge for us. We have a lot of information that we want to get out to folks and sort of figuring out in what order to do that. We think we've got it in a better place than we have, but certainly, you know, not perfect quite yet. But also our callback policy, and I think this is super important. Something that we hear sometimes is, you know, I'm calling and I'm just getting the auto message and I want to speak to a real person. I get it. I also would like to speak to a real person when I call someplace, especially if it's during normal business hours. That's to be expected. Unfortunately, we're a really, really busy department. We not only have, you know, people on the phone, we have people coming into the counter. Oftentimes we have to discuss, you know, things amongst the staff for different elements of a project. But what we've implemented is an end of day callback policy. So if you leave a message on any one of our voicemails, the policy is you will get a call back by the end of the day. Even if the person is not the person who can solve your problem, you will get a call back from someone saying, we got your message. I've given your message to this person. Here's their contact information if you need to follow with them directly, but I want to make sure that you know that we heard from you. It's not perfect. It's probably not the very best that we can do, but we certainly are getting there. And we've heard the board's feedback on that particular point. Document scanning and file consolidation. If I could only tell you, when they do a FOIL request, the amount of running around that they have to do because of the very antiquated way that a lot of these files are kept. So with the help of the board helping us to put some money in the budget to complete this, we're starting to scan a lot of the different files that encompass one property file, so that if someone has a FOIL request, we could basically just drag and drop. Here you go, here's everything, instead of walking all around the building with a file cart and then scanning things individually as it comes up. And then finally, greening our fleet. We don't have a lot of vehicles. We have 5, which, you know, depending on how we do with staffing, we're probably going to need more next year, but we've already anticipated that. But we are moving towards a completely gas-free fleet. We have 2 electric vehicles currently, and then we have a plug-in hybrid, and we're looking to get only more of the same. We're not interested in getting any more gas-powered vehicles because certainly all of our travel is local and there's really no need for it. So where do we still need to see improvement? We know that we need to do a better job of coordinating with the chamber, local business owners, which again, that's sort of that ombudsman program that we're trying to work with Officer Bateman. But as well as, some really, really simple stuff. We have all of the knowledge, just putting it on paper and translating it into Spanish that we could circulate. Something that's very easy to do, but we have not, had the bandwidth, frankly, to be able to do it as yet. But we know that that's an important component, and hopefully this presentation can be sort of the first of many contributions towards that. Fine-tuning the process for emergency callouts from OFD and OPD. We've gotten much, much better, but basically, we just need to make sure that we have a consistent process so that our department can be alerted quickly enough that the scene is still held by emergency responders by the time that we need to get in. Weekend and evening blitzes for code enforcement. It's no secret. Our department works an average workday. We do have coverage on Saturdays as well, but we would really like to see a couple evenings and weekends and unexpected times to have those code enforcement cars out on the road, just to keep folks on their toes and let them know that we're watching, and you really do need to have a permit to be doing work at all times, not just Monday through Friday. Vacant property management, something I mentioned a little bit earlier, and then also communications. I think what we're going to hope for is to have a similar update to the Board of Trustees like this, albeit much shorter, I imagine, once a quarter on specific things that the board wants to hear from. And that's sort of where we go on the next slide, please. So as promised, we're returning back to this original chart. These are some of the metrics that we're keeping now. It's not perfect. A lot of these are pulled from the Municity system that we use. Some of them are kept manually. But that is to say, I'm not sure that any of this out of context is anything that the Board of Trustees will really find valuable. So to know that, for example, we issued 5 more sign permits this year than we did last year, in the absence of knowing how many new businesses opened or anything else about that, I don't know that that's super valuable to you. So what we want to be doing at those times quarterly, or however often the board would like to hear from us, what metrics would you like for us to be collecting going into the new year, and how do you want this story to be told? Because as the board knows, I could talk for the next 6 hours about this or pretty much anything else. We know your time is valuable. We want to make sure that when you hear from us, it's time well spent. So we have some ideas about some things that, perhaps we could bring forward on a quarterly basis that might be helpful for you to hear. The application to permit timeframe by type. So for example, tree permits. In this quarter, we got 50 of them. 10 of them got turned around within 48 hours. 15 of them, took a week. We have 3 outliers, things like that, to the degree that would be helpful. Property maintenance complaints and resolutions. So, an anonymous, obviously, itemized list of complaints on what the resolutions were. Unpermitted units or construction identified, units placarded, the rate of success for conditional discharges, which is something that Sonia and Stuart could assist with. But basically, when I'm through, what my ask is of the board is, what else do you want to know? How do you want to be able to measure the policies that have been put into place and how well they're working? Next slide, please. So that's it. We're certainly all here to answer questions, and thank you for indulging a very long presentation. I want to call out the building department's main phone number, 941-3199. The person who answers the phone is bilingual in English and Spanish. So if when you get on the phone, if you dial 0 immediately, you'll get Jen Daly. Jen is awesome, and she is happy to help you. She's super, super friendly. If you have comments, compliments, or complaints that you want to sort of escalate, just please email me. I think I have developed a pretty good reputation of being super fair. If someone is asked to pay a charge and they don't agree with it, and we find out that they probably shouldn't have been asked to pay that charge, it's all or nothing. I don't want to do a reduced charge. If we're wrong, but if we're right, we're right, and we're gonna take the payment. So certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to listen and sort of work through anything with anyone that has any questions, compliments, or complaints. And then again, a PSA for City Squared, land use approvals, building permits, these are all public information. You can find all of it at a clip if you go to citysquared.com and then look under Village of Ossining, or call us and we can walk you through it. We are still working on getting a user kiosk in the front. I don't know if Joe or Greg can offer an update on that. We've had a little bit of an issue because we were using the kiosk that was there to take credit card payments. So I know a lot of things had to be switched over. But if you come into the office, we can help you, to navigate City Squared as well. And I see out of the corner of my eye, Jamie texted me a reminder that she and Joe Knapp from the building department put together some really comprehensive City Squared videos on YouTube. So it's basically just a, step-by-step tutorial in English and Spanish about how to get into the program and do some of the very simple introduction level steps that you might need in order to start an application. So that is all from me. Jamie, if you want to stop screen sharing, and then we can certainly open it up to questions. Thank you again.
All righty. That was great. It's like a course in college. So it's a lot to unpack. We don't need to go line by line. I just think we asked for this because we haven't really seen the building department in front of us. So I'm exhausted just hearing all that they do, which means they must be exhausted doing all that they do. And you didn't see it, Maddie, thank you for doing this, but Sonia's here, Valerie's here. They're sitting towards the back. So who wants to start? I mean, there are questions. Let's keep the macro. It's not the last time we're talking. It's not this is the beginning of conversations. Maddie suggesting quarterly updates. Maddie would like to know key metrics that we would like to see so that they're collecting and that we start having data points so that we can actually make decisions based on data, not on perceptions. So I heard a few of those things. I suggest we keep it a little bit macro and then we can email the line by line. But thank you, Maddie, for going through the trouble of giving us the flow charts and all that. I do know that you also had envisioned to put this together so that we could also make it public to people so that somebody can actually see all the details. That doesn't mean we have to discuss all the details, but that somebody sees it. So do you want to start? And I know Bob also obviously will have questions, so why don't I just start with you? Pat, if you have any questions, and then Bob, I'm going to go to you after Pat.
I have a lot of questions, a lot of comments, and based on your direction, I probably wouldn't go into them all right now. I think for me, one, thanks for all the work that's going on. So I appreciate that. And I think there are a bunch of places in here where maybe I'd like to have a conversation and I can talk about where I think there might be incremental kind of information for the charts or pieces of clarity to kind of help make it a little easier. I guess overarching, one of the themes I heard you say many times that you want to make it, you want to make it safe for the permittee, you want to make sure it's safe, you want to manage value, but in here anywhere commentary towards service, customer service related, right? Because the reality is, well, the core, or my perspective is obviously at the core is to make sure people are following the code. The core is to make sure people are safe, that things are being built appropriately. You got to make sure that people aren't living in crowded houses and all that sort of stuff. There is a service component to it around how are we being, helpful? How are we being responsive? How are we being from that perspective? So I think some of the metrics you talked a little bit about at the end around duration and how long does it take to go from, if everything's in City Squared, should be able to know from the first time something's opened, when does it pass through every stage gate, right? So we should be able to get some duration kind of metrics for the different types, right? I think that would be, a little bit helpful from that perspective. And Yeah, but no, I mean, that's kind of like the big thing.
So I'm looking at your deck. I know what I said. I'm sticking with it. But Maddie, you're not here. So Pat has notes on almost every page, and I've seen this presentation, and as you saw, I had notes on everything. It's just that you and I were able to talk about it. I'm going to suggest, and because of what you do professionally, I think it would be helpful to everybody not to do it this minute. Let's let it digest, etc. So you could go through the pages. Did you paginate them? I can't see. No, okay. Got to paginate because it's going to get confusing if you can't say on page 3, you know. So if you could ask your questions in writing and just copy all of us, and Maddie can do that in staff meetings or whatever. That's one comment. And then we could either discuss it publicly or you'll just get your answers. Oh, okay, this is the answer to question on this, or I'll clarify this and I'll resend it out and all that. The second part is customer service. So there are hundreds and hundreds of studies on how one measures customer service in different sectors and technologies, and because human beings have different expectations of customer service. And I think I once shared with somebody that when I ran a very large call center, there was a theory that the longest amount of time that somebody spends on a phone is the better customer service, because they're taking half an hour to discuss a mortgage. I worked for a bank. There was another theory that it's the shortest amount of time because you answered the question efficiently, and that person, and they used to get bonuses quarterly, the customer service reps. It's exactly the same call, two very different opinions. So what does a manager do? How do you measure? That's a simple metric. And there were 100 metrics, by the way. That was one. And we used to have hours of conversation. So I've lived through, like, how does one define customer service? What I learned is they got to just define it. And while not, so if you could be helpful in saying, look, if we're up to me, these are the 3 things I would add to metrics that say, you know, let's get better at these 3 things. So I think even like seeing the numbers of calls and complaints that come in, I'm already ahead of the game tonight than I was before I got here today, because I had no clue how many complaints. And I also don't know if that's a good number or not, because I don't know if 500 is a lot or a little. How would I know? 500 could be like nothing. Like if you went to other municipalities, 500 could be astronomical. Usually it's 50 a month or whatever, a day or whatever. So I think getting our arms around data points, trends, where you want to get more, when you want to get less, and what's considered good. Like, what's the team, not us, but what does the team look for? Like, what would make the team happy? That we took care of 98% of the calls within 24 hours and answered people and got resolution. That we did a survey, you know, to all the people that we spoke with, and 50% said they were happy with the results. I don't know. These are just ways to measure. But if you could be helpful, Pat, because I think you actually do this for a living. You're not the only one. There are other people sitting here, but it would be helpful to just get a sense. Otherwise, we're having a discussion about perceptions. Perceptions, 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 and it just goes on, and then everybody walks out angry. How am I supposed to measure this? How much, you know, but if you do 3 things, that if it improves and how that might look, then people could aim for it. They could say, okay. So I think that those 2 items of going through it would be amazingly helpful. And anybody else that has a professional background in this, or looks at it, or just you folks, you know, whether it's Valerie, Sonia, whether it's you guys, like, this is what you guys do all day. We don't, right? Thank God. So I think, like, if you say, you know, if I had my druthers, if I could tell you one thing that I would feel good about after 3 months that we improved on, it would be X, that would improve customer service or the perception of it or whatever. We could include that, because I'm looking at you guys because you're out there and you're not on Zoom, but you're here. Because the people who do the work are the ones that can help us and say, look, you might think this is the most important, but really, returning phone calls, as Maddie had suggested, within 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever, or returning 100% of the calls, if we can get to that, that's pretty good. We didn't do that before, but that is an improvement. I'd be happy with that. I'm giving you an example. Choose whatever you want, but it's something about, are you good with this? Did you want to say something, Joe?
Yes, but what I would ask is, just as your mayor had said about defining customer service, because to keep in mind, when the public is discussing customer service, you can say customer service, for example, how we respond to somebody when they put in a call, if they come to the office and ask to speak to somebody, that's one thing. But sometimes the public's perception of a good customer service, you have to remember some of those people also are made to do things that in their perception is considered poor customer service. They made me take a permit. They wrote me a violation.
Yeah, understood.
To them,
We know
their
that.
interpretation of it is, well, that was poor customer service.
So just so you know,
Set the metrics of what.
just so you know,
What the expectation.
there's virtually no study ever, anywhere, that says happiness is a metric in customer service. As defined by, there are people that go to hospitals who have dying members, and when they're asked, what did you think of it? I mean, that's one of the worst cases for a human to go through, are still able to say, the nurse was amazing. Right? You have a dying relative, everything goes wrong, surgery didn't work, nothing worked, you're in the worst point of your life, and when asked, they're still able to say, the nurse was amazing. That's actually customer service, not the fact that the entire surgery got screwed up. That's not what the question is. So you got to think a little bit more, and we understand that, right? It's really the measurement of what would you say,
Customer service is, yes.
right?
Today.
Yeah. It's not, I'm happy. I said we were gonna go to Bob. Bob?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
So we're not trying to be hard about it. Yep. Go
Couple
on,
things.
Bob.
Thank you, Maddie. Very in-depth. Demonstration or whatever you want to call it here. Two things. I was glad to hear that you're working on the kiosks, which was something that was sold to us when this first came about. We're gonna have all of these computers and they can come in and work on it. And if they have problems with the permit, I'm glad to hear you're working on it. So that's progress. That's good. Second thing is the OTRs. If I wrote it down correctly, this year, 293 were written. And I think 52 of them are going to a higher court and 62 are resolved, if I'm correct. So that's way less than half of the total of the 293. Are they in limbo? Is it a backup? How are we missing 170 something OTRs that aren't accounted for?
Well, I can answer that question. So some of them they're compliant. People are doing what they're supposed to do. Now there's some of them, like if someone write a violation for someone who have to get a permit, sometimes these permits take time. They have to go to the zoning board, they have to go to the planning board, that takes time. So those OTRs actually stay open until everything is resolved. When people reach out to us and say, hey, we need additional time, I'm working on this, that's the customer service piece right there. We try to work with everybody. Not everybody can get everything done within the 30-day time frame. So if people communicate with us, we will extend the period. We do have 12 months of an open OTR before we decide to bring it to court. So we do have time, even if they fall short in the 8th month, we could proceed to court with that. But we do work with a lot of people who stay in constant communication with us. Sometimes someone get a permit. Sometimes they have issues with their contractors. It's various issues that come across that delay the completion of a violation that was issued to someone. So that some of the play within the numbers where maybe it hasn't been closed out or it hasn't been sent to court.
All right, thank you. So basically that number that's not accounted for is basically in limbo or there's other issues going on.
Yeah, also remember, if an individual received an order to remedy and they're progressively attempting to make those corrections, we're not gonna turn that into a court appearance ticket because they're progressively trying to correct the violation that they received. So although it's 30 days, the 30 days that are issued for a violation is if we do not get any response within 30 days, we'll issue a court appearance ticket. But if they're progressively, moving forward, getting an architect ready to submit plans, we're going to hold that OTR in that status until that's completed.
Yeah, that's understandable. I get that 100%. It just, somehow it seems like a lot to be, we're going into our last quarter here. And it seems like a lot of, 170 something OTRs that are out in limbo. It's a lot of work going on. And a lot, I'm sure some of it is the stupidest thing, I'm sure. All right, that's just holding it up. But it just seemed to pop out on the screen on me. That's all. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Maddie. Great as always. Joe and Greg, thanks for joining us. I'll say first from personal experience, I've seen both of you gentlemen at work, and it's really great to see both of you are there often on someone's, maybe not their worst day, because I think probably OPD and OVAC see folks on their worst day, but you're right up there. It's a pretty shitty day, but you're there, professional, and I really appreciate the work that you do in English and in Spanish. It's a beautiful thing. So, some ideas that came to me as I was listening to the presentation, because there's so much rich content there. One is there are people that are in certain phases of their lives. So, for example, if you're a new homeowner, that it would be really helpful to get some of this information packaged in some way to say, hey, you just bought a home in Ossining. Here's some information about how on all the things that you talked about. Because other than that, it's really only unless someone is doing the work and they kind of fiddle around and ask and call that they figure it out. But I think a proactive thing could be helpful. Similar, like folks that may be doing renovations or whatever. There's just, I think, people that groups of folks that you see patterns that emerge that might be helpful to proactively provide people with information. Even if that's something that we prepare, put on the website, and then we just point people toward a new homeowner website on the village website. Like that would be really, really helpful. In terms of data, the warning that I would have, Mary in particular, when it comes to data and the collection of data is that sometimes we can get lost in the sauce and like in the collection of all this information and how is it actually useful. So I would say what would be most helpful to me are two things. One is figuring out what are, from your perspectives, what are the most important pieces of information that drive your work? And it could be speed of certain things, it could be amount of certain things, whatever it is. You're the professionals. Let us know. What do you think are the most important things that drive your work? And then let us help you to support you, hold you accountable, et cetera, to those things. That's number one. And then number two, there are other departments that we have, whether it's the police department or whatever, that also go out there in the field that are doing work that also collect information. And so what are they doing that might be helpful? So one thing that comes to mind for me, for example, is complaints. So the police department has this whole system around complaints. If you have a complaint, you fill out the form, it goes to a person, they have a whole board that reviews the complaints. I'm not suggesting you have something like that, but some sort of methodology for collecting complaints might be helpful by way of customer service to help differentiate how much of the complaints that people have are about the work and the fact that they have to do work, and that's the complaint, or that it's about how the work was done and it's something that we can do to improve. I think something like that can help to build out qualitatively. What we're talking about here is a lot of quantitative data that we're collecting in terms of the work. So I think that would be good. We didn't talk anything about budget, but it would be helpful to know to what extent budget drives some of these decisions in terms of number of people on the team, the kind of work that you do, anything like that. Certainly everybody wants more money, but if you had more money, what would you do with it? That would be helpful for us to know, because during budget time, what we have to do is make decisions, more to this, less to that, and try to figure out with the limited resources we have, what are we going to do? So it would be helpful to have recommendations, not just during budget time where we go line by line and you talk about here's what we're asking for, but times like this throughout the year, anything that can help us to really contextualize what the budget can help to drive. And then the last piece is social. So as we are all learning this week how to better use social media, one of the kinds of social media accounts that the algorithm served to me that I happen to love are home inspections, mostly men that conduct home inspections, and then they go through and they talk about like how crazy people's homes are and like what's going on. And I just find it very interesting. And I don't know to what extent you can translate something like that, even if it's not people specific homes, but kind of talking generally about your experience. I think it would help both for education and for entertainment. I think we would find it really interesting. And I think it would help with buy-in as well, so that people don't just see it as, oh, you're looking to enforce the rules, but also to understand that slide about how you're helping the community and really helping to make us safer. That's it for me. And you can respond to any of that or none of that.
Yeah, I want to make one response to it. The first thing you spoke about regarding being proactive, and I'm going to be transparent and say we are transparent. We are very proactive with communicating with the public, like when Maddie was saying via Jamie, where there's presentations online how to use our system. But the difficult thing is the fact that when we still proactive with people, they still don't follow the rules. You know, as recent today, had a conversation with Karen and with Stewart regarding the property, which I spoke with someone what they need to do, need to have permits for, verbally and via email, and they still proceeded to do work without getting a permit. What more can we do to stop that?
Yeah. I think in those kinds of situations, those are folks that are making bad decisions. What comes to mind for me is something more like working with some of the real estate agents that we have that work in the village that are working with people buying homes to say, hey, as you're showing people homes and helping people to buy homes, here's some information that you can share with them about how they can be compliant with all of the different rules and regulations.
Yeah, and I agree with that. We have some real estate agents who have done a lot of transactions here and have gotten to understand the idea that actually getting ahead of the game when you have a listing to do some follow-up and research on the property, if there's any open permits, if there's violations, to get those satisfied early, because often we've had where someone, finished off their basement, didn't take any permits, and now it gets found, they find out on a title search, and Tuesday is the closing, and we're finding out today they need to legalize this. So we've over the years we've tried to work with them that they've seen that in the best interest for your client is to get ahead of this early, because then they lose a potential buyer, they can't get the closing done, or they lose their financing because they can't meet the deadline. But now using some of the items like you're suggesting with more people go on to social media now, is to have this information out there. Years ago, I did stuff before social media, is becoming much more of an avenue for people with brochures. And people came up to the office, we've had them in the front and they grabbed them, and it was just simple information about how to apply for a permit. What are things you should look for if you're a tenant or so forth in your home to make sure you have smoke alarms and working, how you have heat is working all the time. What you can do if these things are not, if your landlord is not providing these things, what you do and what your recourse is. But now with the village going forward with the idea of bringing this into a method of social media, we're going to pursue to do that, which should help. But for some of the stuff on communication, we have different methods of doing that. People will send emails. If they make a phone call to the office and they dial my number, for example, and I'm not sitting at my desk, it actually becomes a voicemail. So I can listen to it and hear what it is and get back to them. They can call in a complaint. People come to the counter to file complaints. If we're there, we attend to whatever the residents' concerns are at the counter. And often, they walk right in. I always say, if I walked into an office, not always am I going to get the person who's there to talk to them. In some cases where I've gone to them, if you don't have an appointment, make one and come back. We actually, if we're there, we'll work with the person there, because we're not going to have a resident come back in 2 weeks. So we do make attempts to it. Not to say that it's perfect. We can make it better. But we do have, what we have available to us right now is we always do try to work with people. Greg will always, people that ask questions, Greg has always responded to them by email question. each question one by one, explaining exactly what they can do. But what we do in the building department to other people sometimes is very confusing. Because as you can see from the presentation, there's a lot of processes and it depends. Like I say about somebody who built a deck, now it was, okay, so how do I legalize the deck? Because I have a closing next week. But guess what? You're in violation of setbacks. So now you got to go to zoning board. So now they have a bigger problem. So it all depends on what it is. Some things can be, solved easily and quickly, and some don't. But we'll work at it.
Appreciate it.
I don't have too much to add, except thank you, Maddie. That was amazing. My head is spinning. Thank you, you guys. I know you don't have easy jobs. As a homeowner in Ossining for over 30 years, I've been through the process of getting permits for any number of projects. Usually gone pretty well. Haven't had any huge problems, but I find that around me, on whether it's my street or wherever, that there seem to be two or three projects that people undertake without permits where they end up getting stop work orders, and that is front porches. People don't seem to realize you need a permit to rebuild your front porch. Fences, people over a certain height, right?
We don't require permits for fences, but there are regulations to height and that
Yeah,
has to
height.
have the good face side to.
Mhm.
But we don't ask for permits on that because if we issued a permit, I'd have to ask a homeowner to provide a survey, because I can't issue a permit to allow you to install a fence on your neighbor's property. They can say to me, how come you issued the permit and they ended up putting on my property? Well, for me to verify that, you need a survey.
Right.
And to ask an individual to get a survey, or if they don't have a survey, and pay $2,000 today, seems to be a little bit excessive to it. So we made a policy in the village that you can install the fence, you don't need a permit, but if you put it on your neighbor's property, it becomes a civil matter. If you put it in the village's right away, then you could end up having the village is going to say to remove it, because I'm sure they won't give them, a lease agreement to do it. But with fences, they don't ask the permit. But there are regulations.
Just cut down trees, I think, without a permit. This happens a lot. You can't put the tree back.
Correct.
But I just went and got a tree permit for a diseased sugar maple that has to come down, sadly. And I tried to do it all myself on the website. What's it called?
City Square.
Yeah, City Square. And they wanted a property survey, which I don't have.
Right.
And
your
so I
op-
ended up letting the tree service do it.
Right.
do
Your
the
option is a
application.
survey, or we can get a GIS site plan. We wouldn't make, if there's a survey, we'll take that and put that in.
I don't think I have.
Because we have to mark on there that if it's somebody who wants to take a tree down that's not an emergency tree removal, we have to just mark it to indicate it for the arborist to go out to
Right.
where to look for it.
But the process, I know that people, have a lot of, I think a lot of what happens is people don't know. And I don't know how you proactively inform people of the things they do and do not need permits for. Or they start a job and it goes into permit land when originally it was a repair, and then it becomes a rebuild, and then, right? So do we have, you need a permit to do this, you don't need a permit to do that sort of thing? Do we have that somewhere?
I don't want to
Not
step on
something
Joe
we-
because I can't see who's talking or who's not talking. And Joe, you're very quiet. I don't know if your microphone is turned on. I
Sorry.
think that, we have thought about this a lot of different ways. And I think unfortunately the problem is it depends, right? Because somebody's perception of, oh, I'm just repairing something is actually a wholesale replacement. So to say you don't need a permit to replace a front stair, but if you rip it out, then you do need a permit to, completely replace it in kind. It's a little bit difficult, but that's why I continue to underscore and this is not just about the building department. I've had the great honor and pleasure of working with every department in the village, and I can say this uniformly across the board. The people who work here are among the most hardworking, earnest people you're ever likely to meet. We're not just avatars of people who work in local government. We're people. We understand that these rules can be onerous and confusing, and we're trying to do our best to walk you through it. The easiest thing to do is pick up the phone. If you have a thought in your mind that maybe somebody's going to ding me on this, just pick up the phone. There's a legion of people who want to help you answer that question proactively.
So if I want to remove the aluminum siding from my house and restore the exterior, this is my dream. Do I need a permit to do that? You know what I mean? Like, do I to take off vinyl siding, or I heard you didn't, or but I can just call and go, I can ask, right? Or can I put a but I think that people need to get in the habit of that. And I understand that maybe we have a lot of rules in this country on everything.
So believe it or not, we do get a lot of calls where people do call up
Mm.
asking, do I need a permit? But obviously we're not tracking those calls. A
Right.
lot of people do call in and say, hey, I'm planning on doing this. What do I need to do? Or anything of the sort. But we get those calls a lot because different municipalities got different rules,
Yeah.
especially when there's people who buying homes here.
Yeah.
I'm looking to buy this home. I want to know what I need to do. So we actually do get those calls and we provide that information. And a lot of the times you see them in the office. Oh, you were the person I spoke with on the phone. Oh, or we see them out in the public. Oh, I think I spoke to you on the phone when I called in about this. It happens a lot, but it doesn't show as much as the negative, unfortunately.
I mean, the problem is the people who try to get away with this stuff, and there's a lot of that goes on, and it's hard to find and control. But, I applaud you guys. It's not, I know that I think every municipality has, building and department stuff that happens because it is very complicated. And when it comes to people's homes, I think a lot of people don't feel like they should have to get permission to do something to their house, right? And they do. So anyway, thank you.
I can understand why in some cases it's confusing because just as Greg said, some municipalities have different rules and regulations. Like some will say you need a permit to replace your roof shingles. Other municipalities say you don't, we don't. Some
Does.
the town does. See, so again, it becomes a little confusing because they arsoning. Some of the contractors don't know the difference at town, the village, one ordinance in one municipality and different in another. But we do encourage everyone to ask if you're not sure. And even when they do come in and ask, they'll often tell me, oh, I'm sorry. And I'd rather you ask because it's better to be safe than sorry. And we encourage you to do that because we don't want you to be stopped in the middle of your project and you already tore down half the house and now you're stopped. So you should ask ahead of time so we can guide you and tell you the right thing to do. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, just wrote some macro notes here. I'm not going to repeat what I've said. I do remember though that when we were looking at websites for the village, the most frequent kind of website isn't actually what we use. The most frequent one was like, are you a first-time home buyer? This is who you call. This is what you need to do. Some links to some in those days, brochureware. Now nobody would use that, but that idea. Are you a new business owner? So if you think about who lives in Ossining, a lot of apartments, so they don't need a lot of your help. If they're in the town, it's a lot of condos, it's a whole different ballgame because the condo complex. But we get a lot of first-time buyers, especially post-COVID. So these are people lived mostly in cities and have no clue. It's not like they lived in another municipality and had rules for a house. They don't have a house. Maybe they grew up in one, who knows? And we get people from also other countries and other parts of this country where there's no zoning at all, right? So there are a majority of this country outside of cities don't have zoning laws, actually, including upstate New York. You want to build a house on 50 acres, good luck. And if you messed up, you messed up, good luck when you sell it, who cares? So we have those people, so they really don't know. I think if we start chunking out groups and target both our website and the way we talk to people. So we should have a very clear definition of, is this your first house? Is this your first house in Austining? Because it has to be specific to that. Is this a business? So that's two chunks, as I would call them. There's another chunk of information, and that is landlords, right? So if people are landlords, small, big, medium, they need to call. I mean, I would just say, call us before you do anything, right? You've got a chunk of people who are repeat offenders. And this, I didn't know, nobody told me, is BS. We all know who they are. You know better than we do. Can't put that on the website, but you do have to track that. And while we live in a very, very rule-oriented society, so the person will say, oh, that wasn't me. You know it was a person, but they have 10 LLPs or 10 LLCs or whatever. But you're a human, which we have learned tonight, and we already knew that, and you know who they are. So repeat offenders have to be treated. I mean, I think you have to chunk out all this stuff. I also talk about chunking out because we really have to think very clearly about what could be outsourced. So it's great, the sanitation being involved now in ticketing. We've made a lot of progress in the past year. What I don't think we will make progress on for the next 3 years, in my humble opinion, is human resource help. I do not believe that, given the work environment in this area of the country, that you're going to be able to say, we'll get somebody, or we'll get 2 more people, or we'll get 3 more people, and that'll solve the problem. I don't think that's real. So I think we're going to have to think about use of technology. How does technology help us? How do other departments help us? How do people, can we certify different kind of people? And I think we're going to have to put some thinking caps on, because whatever happened 4 or 5 years ago since the 1980s isn't happening for the next 3 to 5 years, given workforce environments in the Northeast. So I think we can budget for 10 more people. Who cares? You're not going to get them. I mean, it's not happening, and they're not going to be good. So we have good people. Maybe we'll get 1 more good person. Let's talk about alternate, like, sort of buckets and how we could do things. And it doesn't all have to be you. When I talk about adding information, or when Omar talked about it for the website, that could be outsourced to somebody. Valerie's sitting here, Sonia's here. There are other people that we can add either to what they're doing or add to the job descriptions in those departments, so it doesn't all land here. So those are just some of the sort of the pieces that I put together. I also have a double question mark. This whole registry thing, we spent 3 years of our lives on this. Thank God Manny Casada's not here, because he would blow a gasket. Okay? Because he spent 5 years on that conversation. Finally get it off the ground, to then be told, oh, sort of can't do it. And I'm told that there's a little bit of a discrepancy in people thinking that it can be done or can't. And in NICOM's latest piece today, there actually has been approval of rental registry as it relates to about short-term rentals, which I assume means like things like Airbnbs and stuff, but the concept is the same. Registries, and I don't want to discuss why that is, because it's considered taking homes in the community where this mayor was interviewed. Not mayor, she was District 46. She was senator, state senator. She said in her area, it's real, and she has a lot of cities, including Albany. It's, forget the hotel problem that it's destroying. It's actually creating landlords out of individuals, because you're landlords for a week or a day or whatever. And that's not good for communities, in her opinion. So she passed laws which have been approved for a rental registry. I didn't write to you, Stuart, because I just read it today, and I didn't read the whole I just read the interview, not the links, which then will take me another day. My point is, I'd like to revisit the rental registry, and if we have to get expertise to figure out how to legalize it, we spent more than 3 years. Let's just throw it out because NICOM or at some conference, somebody said something. I want to make sure 100% whether we can or can't or adjust that, because I think it would also help. I think Joe agreed that the rental registry would help. And the last piece is not anywhere on here that I would like looked at, this is a personal thing, is I have this thing about parking in residential areas. I said to the village manager at a meeting earlier today that we spent a lot of effort on downtown parking because there was a perception that there was no parking. Turns out, not a reality. Turns out it's in our residential areas that we have challenges of parking and only so much linear footage. Maddie and I did discuss it actually when we were looking at this. So somewhere in here for next time, I would like to also really think about what Joe had said 4 years ago. I wasn't mayor, so it was 4 or 5 years ago. You said we have to look at the use of garages, that if you have a garage, and the use of the allowable space for parking on the property without front of house parking, because that'll alleviate some of the linear footage problem. Sue Donnelly said to me, we can also restrict the number of permits that we give people. There's only so much linear footage, first come, first serve. These are conversations with ideas. I'm not suggesting we jump in tomorrow. Do not quote the mayor saying, let's like do first come, first serve for hardship. But everybody seems to now be thinking creatively without saying, if I just had one more person. But I love so much of what you guys have come up with, and I feel like there's a lot of creative thinking going on, and nobody likes rules, but I'll say this till people hear me. When you live in a community of 30,000 people sitting on 3.5 square miles, every time you touch your deck, every time you take a tree, you're moving the soil, you are doing something to the people living around you. It isn't just about it's your property, therefore you should be able to do whatever you want. There's a reason all these rules were put in place. Before 1990, we didn't have very many rules, and we're now still suffering from some of the problems from those decades. Joe, you always talk about this. Things just happened. We don't have blueprints. Nothing's going on. I think a lot of good stuff's been going on. I don't want anybody to walk out of here thinking. I know that in courts in the past 3 years, we've moved more things along. It's sticky. It's New York. A lot of tenant rights, a lot of this rights and those rights. That's all fine. There's a reason why these rules have come into being, because people who make the rules, who legislate rules, were asked to make those rules because there were problems they were solving. That's why so many rules exist. If the problems didn't exist, nobody would have come to a board and say, can you legislate something to solve it? But there's still, I think, some ideas that you had that I don't want. I didn't see them in the presentation. I just don't want that being forgotten. You know what I'm talking about, right? With the driveways and stuff. Okay. But in fairness, Maddie could not make this presentation longer. I think she timed it for half an hour thinking that's plenty and put a lot of stuff per page. That could have been 100 pages, what she did. So understood. I'm going to end with Valerie, Sonia. Do you guys have anything to add because you're both involved as team players, the whole team thing that happens. As was stated by Maddie, they meet once a week. There's a team. This is not done by individuals alone. Is there something that you want to bring up that was brought that you think is super important? You don't have to, not obligated. I just want to hear from you since you both took time to be here tonight. Or he can bring, because otherwise nobody can hear you and we have a lot of people.
There's nothing that I want to add. I think that Maddie's presentation was very comprehensive. I do think that that the building department in general is working really hard and just, in my opinion, doing a bang-up job. I would echo Joe's follow-up question about a little more specifics about what you mean with respect to customer service.
Fair.
I think that is that umbrella term that is
Mhm.
important to define. So.
Good, thank you. And Valerie, I know you're like here every meeting, but.
I was just gonna, just to follow up, my role with the building department is a little bit different than Sonia's. I work directly with the building department in terms of reviews and Joe does all the referrals for any land use applications that come in. So Joe and I work very closely together and so I think, Maddie has helped put in a process where there is, like, I'm gonna say, a land use application team between Joe, myself, you're the planning board attorney as well as the planning board engineer. And we collectively will, especially if there's something that we have questions on or somebody has questions on the land use approval process, we'll make sure we're all on the same page so that we have a united response to the applicants to hopefully help ease their their movement through the
Right,
process.
and just to add to that, we offer what we call pre-app meetings, so any of the applicants
Right.
can schedule a meeting with us on Wednesday afternoons. We give them, but they will call Jamie Kane in the planning department and schedule an appointment. And then we have all the people, we'll have the land use attorney if needed to be there. Valerie is on the meeting. I'll be at the meeting and we can guide them whether they just have something they're proposing to do and are planning on submitting an application, or they already have an application and we're working with them on what they need to provide so that the process of going through the boards will go quicker. That's one, and then we also have internal meetings. We go over the calendar of what's going to be on the agenda for the planning board. And we do the same thing with the zoning board, and we have the chair people of those boards at the meeting, and we go over what's going to be on the agenda the next week and discuss, any concerns they have or what's needed so that we can make sure that the application moves as quickly through the boards as possible.
And so things don't fall through the cracks, which was a complaint like a couple years ago. That was one of, if I recall, like often quoted complaint that person said this and that. But now,
Right.
because you're all sitting in the same room, the odds are very low that that person said anything because you're actually in the same room at the same time.
Right, right.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we can move on. This was fantastic and really difficult, and I think we will take Maddie's recommendation. At least I would say doing this quarterly. I don't think we need more often, yeah? Or do you guys think more often or less often? Quarterly? Good. All right, so it sounds like quarterly, and I would just schedule it now for when you want to do quarterly, so we all know when that's. And, and that way we can move forward, but we do owe them some things. We have to do some definitions. Maddie asked that we look at those metrics, that chart. I don't know how many things it had on it. Maybe we could circle 3 or 5 things. I think that was an ask from the board, if you recall. That was page 2 or 3, and then it was back as page second to last, I think. So if we could help with that, that would be helpful as well, sir.
I think my general recommendation would be instead of 4 times a year, doing 3 times a year, and then the 4th would be during budget time.
Okay.
Dennis.
Fair enough.
During the last quarter, if you got a
Understood.
presentation like this plus budget feels like maybe it's too much.
Yeah, like it might end up redundant if we have anything, we can ask it during the department's budget review, because the budget's not just about money, it's about what's going on. Okay, fair enough.
All right.
Good. Thank
Great.
you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate everybody's time on this.
Everyone, I do want to acknowledge that, well, maybe not specified, the customer experience, if you will, the resident experience is something that we look at. We really try to be resident focused to the degree possible. Part of the reason that Maddie gave this presentation is because, well, like now we're probably going on 2 years. Maddie was given the opportunity, because I identified her for her brilliance, to be able to work with the building and planning departments. And we really did, as some of you may remember, and Trustee Yost, you weren't on the board yet, but really looking at the planning department, the building department, the code enforcement department, which are 3 very discrete functions. We restructured, we brought Valerie in because we really needed the bandwidth of a planning department. It was very, very hard for one person to fill all the different roles that we needed to be filled with everything going on, and making that relationship more fluid with the building department, with code enforcement, elevating Greg to senior code enforcement officer, have all been part of that objective, the global objective of making more things more seamless on our end, so they're more seamless for residents. And I really want to acknowledge the things that weren't said, we don't have to go into detail, but there was enormous amount of work that Maddie did in supporting that reorganization with the staff, with the administrative staff too, bringing everybody together and really establishing a different way of working together than had been done in the past. And I want to commend her. I want to commend Joe, Greg, Sonia, Valerie, and the entire building and planning team on all of the concerted efforts they've made, which were pretty significant. There were some seismic changes over the past few years, so I just want to acknowledge that.
Thank you. All right, who's staying for the next fun topic? Planning board feedback.
Fun topic is planning related. So we do have Valerie, and she's gonna she's here to get to discuss the planning board feedback on the T-zone moratorium, and also talk about the and update the board on where we are with cannabis zoning.
Sure. So just to kind of touch base on the T-zone feedback, the planning board actually supported the moratorium. They felt that that was something that they thought is necessary to take a look at. They also kind of noted that, some of the T district zones were discussed a little bit during the comprehensive plan process. So they understood that this also related to some of comprehensive plan implementation, overall policies and stuff like that. So they're in support of the moratorium and look forward to working with the village board.
Thank you.
Cannabis. So at the last work session, we talked about some potential regulations and kind of got this feedback from the board as to what types of regulations or controls that the board might be interested in. So we worked up some potential cannabis regulations for this board's consideration. So first of all, we talked a little bit last time about specifically regulating cannabis dispensaries as its own use, as well as vape shops, smoke shops, and cannabis and vape paraphernalia shops. So similar to what we talked about last time, we wanted to focus on specifically identifying locations where cannabis can be located within certain zoning districts, and a couple zoning districts that we specifically said that the board was not interested in, which was the Village Center zoning district. And then some of the other more specialty zoning districts like the Riverfront Development District, Conservation Development District. Also in your Station Plaza South, which is near where the Briarcliff train station is, as well as some of the planned waterfront C, which is along 34 State Street, and planned waterfront B, which is 30 where the old DPW site is. So those, it would not be permitted in, but it would be permitted in basically your Route 9 districts, as well as where the Ossining train station is, and then along Croton Avenue.
I'm sorry, Ossining train station, what does that refer to? No, I mean, I know where the train station is, specifically.
Basically where the cannabis dispensary is going to be located, which is by the Station Plaza area.
Okay, where the glass place used to be, a gas station
Yes, that's
before
correct.
that.
That's correct. Down by Here Beer Coffee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would not be allowed?
No, it would be allowed in that area.
That would be
but-
the only area by the waterfront that it would be allowed?
That's correct.
So if 30
And-
Water Street has retail there,
Mhm.
would it be allowed there?
It would not right now, but we can, that's part of the discussion. We can change it. We just, right now I have that as not permitted,
Okay,
but we could change it to permitted.
I'm just asking, I just didn't know how far the
Yes.
waterfront goes.
Now, we did, right, we do allow it in the PWA, which is down by North Water Street. That is specifically because that was one of the zones that you also allowed for, for example, cannabis, nursery. And so you could potentially have retail associated with that.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
So just a couple other things. We specifically are noting that no dispensary shall be located within 500 feet of a public use facility. And we're also noting that that would include parks whose primary activity is a playground. That was something that the board talked about. We also included some other regulations that we have been implementing in with the applications that have come before us, become before the planning board already. And this really deals with like screening, outdoor furniture, like that there would be no outdoor benches or seating, lighting, specifically, making sure it's like dark sky lighting, but then it also that it has for security purposes. Hours of operation, that we have no retail dispensary shall operate before 8 AM or after 11 PM, Monday through Saturday, and before 10 AM on Sunday. This was specifically the requirements, do not allow you to restrict less than 70 hours per week, but we felt that starting before 8 AM or operating after 11 PM would, we've restricted those on the other cannabis dispensaries, and we thought maybe bringing that into this regulations. Also, grand opening plan should be required as part of the planning board application, and that they do have to meet the parking requirements of Appendix C in Chapter 270-30 of the zoning regulations. And then the one other thing is that there would be no, specifically no drive-through sales associated with the cannabis dispensaries. So that in basically summarizes the proposed regulations, and we're here for any comments, discussions, additional edits that you would like to see made.
The delivery part of the business, which I think one presenter focused very heavily on, that has nothing to do with us, right? That is the nature that is part of that's not regulated by us. Is that correct?
Right, that's
Okay.
correct.
Oh, thank you. What about Croton Avenue, Upper Croton along there? Is that okay?
Yeah, so you would be allowed to have cannabis dispensaries there. One thing to note, we are proposing to have for like any vape shops, that there would be a distance between vape shops so that those shops would be, you shall not have more than one within 1,000 feet of entrance from each other, or 1,000 feet from an entrance of a cannabis retail dispensary.
Because there's a smoke shop on Croton now across from,
There
but
is.
what is now a church, it's not a school anymore.
Right.
Would that still be allowed to go there with these
Yes.
rules? It would, because it's not a youth, well, it is actually, they have
Well,
youth programming.
So the vape shops, smoke shops, and cannabis paraphernalia shops do not have a distance from schools
Okay,
or.
oh, okay.
Right now, that's something that the board could consider putting in if you would like, but right now, we're just recommending at least not to have a distance between other similar shops or cannabis retail dispensaries. So you don't have this cluster of, paraphernalia shops and cannabis dispensaries.
I'm just curious where you come up with 1,000. Is that like a standard? Is that your idea? Is that the maximum allowable, the minimum allowable? Like, I'm
Right.
trying to understand where you come up with, like, why not 2,000 or
Yes,
15?
so I started with 1,000 as just for conversation. But to some extent, there is already regulations within the cannabis dispensary state law that has a distance requirement, and I believe that's 1,000 feet for the village of Austin. So I just kept it consistent with the vaping and smoke shop. But, again, it's open for the board's discretion on this particular thing because that's not regulated by state law.
Why no drive-throughs?
Well, again, that's completely up to you.
Drive-throughs?
I think in terms of, like, for example, when we had the Popeyes application come in recently, and it's very tight, and then, you don't, and Route 9 can get the queuing can become problematic. So my thought was this would be something very similar, like almost like a fast food operation. You're not there very long, so you potentially could have those types of traffic issues that you would have to deal with. But if you want to consider that, I mean, we can absolutely allow for something like that.
I mean, I haven't seen a ton of it, but my sense is if you're trying to solve for, well, we don't have a ton of parking, but here's one way to kind of make it work. And you mentioned fast food. There's certainly a model for how do you get people moving without completely obstructing traffic. I mean, the McDonald's that's in Arcadian is like 24 hours. There's cars there all the time. And somehow it works, but yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, so I mean, I
It's
can,
more, I actually think the McDonald's has the parking because of the Arcadian. It actually takes more square feet and it has to be more of a square lot.
Mhm.
The drive-throughs actually take up more room, not less.
they do.
And it's actually complicated. So they can only do them in, obviously in certain places. But I think to your question, it seemed like, oh yeah, that seems right. No drive-through. Once you asked it, I was like, yeah, why do we not? I mean, maybe I'm tired. I don't know, but you had a reason for no drive-throughs and it was.
I mean, my reasoning was just the fact that, you know, they become a little bit more complicated of sites, right? And it's a little bit more simple. But, you know, again, I'm open to having that
Because
discussion.
most of the-
There's no specific right or wrong.
Most of this, the way we have it set up is really on Route 9
Yeah.
plus Upper Croton.
Right.
I was okay with the no drive-through. I've seen growing up in the Midwest, drive-through beer stores and liquor stores are all over the place. And I've seen where if you get those into urban or even semi kind of urban places, it really can cause a problem on certain times of night. So like I was okay with that, right? Using from that background, from that perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
I'm agnostic. Starbucks tried it in a number of suburban areas and have shut them down.
yeah,
They seem to clog things up. One car clogs everybody up and it's like dirt everywhere. But again, that's a business decision that they make. It's not a legislative one.
Yeah.
But-
so
Okay.
yeah. So for me, I want to thank you very much too. I thought I was doing math on the parking regulations just to kind of
Yeah.
because I kind of ran it by what I thought would be the requirement for the one that the Cushmart that came up in front of us, and it looked like it was about 3,000 square feet. So that means it's about what 250, one per 250. So it's it was about 12 or so, which to me felt about right because I wanted to make sure that because they said the staffing, like they required like 6 to 8 people
Yeah.
per staff to start with, which is significantly more than a normal retail establishment.
Right.
And so, for me, I didn't know if there was some way to just kind of do math a little differently for this one to make sure that we're covered, especially if it's a smaller establishment that still needs to have, somebody in security, somebody in the bud, somebody taking at the front door, checking ID, all that sort of stuff. Like you've got a minimum number of people that have to work, even if it's small, that might make that math not work for smaller establishments.
Right, so we
Is-
can always add something with, or at minimum, one space per 350 square feet of gross floor area, and then say like a minimum, the number of employees plus.
Yeah, because I saw that in one of the other
Right,
requirements, number of employees plus X.
yeah,
kind
and
of
we can
thing.
do that, and then we can say whichever is great.
Yeah, right. So for me, that was one piece that I was thinking of if we get smaller establishments, right? From that standpoint. In the commentary on no dispensary shall be located within 500 feet of a public youth facility, including parks whose primary activities is a playground. So, but think about, that's park isn't an option. That's a residential zoning
Right.
area, so that's not an option. Nelson Park is like close on the south side. In aggregate, the park is probably not only youth because of tennis courts and all that kind of stuff, but there's a portion of the park that specifically playground right on the south side. So I didn't know if
Yeah, it's
the
very
addition-
separated out, that playground.
right, but it's still quote Nelson Park, right? So I didn't know if like includes parks or portion of parks that are whose primary activity is a playground.
Well,
let
it's a youth
you handle
activity.
that one. That's,
I know, that's,
We
I'm
have
parsing
to
it
be-
a little
We have
bit.
to be very careful
Yeah.
with this because the term is already defined by the state. So if we modify the definition,
They could just
we are
say,
probably looking at a challenge.
yeah,
My suspicion, because in terms of how the state has been doing this, unless it is a park that is specifically is just a playground, it would not fall within it. In other words, it has to be specifically a playground, not that it just has a playground over here, but it's in toto. I believe. Now, again, that's what I think OCM, Office of Cannabis Management, would determine.
Mhm.
I don't think that issue has come up yet because it's all fairly. But, and the board could adopt something similar to what the trustee is saying. And unless and until there was a challenge, that's what the rule would be.
yeah, but it's an all or nothing challenge, right? So because
what would
from what
happen
you
is
said.
if some- Well, the way it works with a challenge is if you enact it and then it's challenged, the state basically, it's per se gonna be, invalid. If you haven't enacted it yet, basically, if the state finds it's no good, can't enact it. So that's, now, could you carve that one section out? Most likely you could. But that also depends upon someone going to the Office of Cannabis Management to challenge it. From the way I read the regs, the Office of Cannabis Management itself is not going to come in and basically say, well, that particular regulation is not good.
Yeah.
Some applicant would have to be the one to make that check.
I actually think it would be less risky to just rename that portion of the park.
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can cut off that playground area and consider it a separate entity.
Well, it's still dedicated parkland. You're just calling it a different, something else as a different, and you could set it up that that's what it is. But it is still, we're not changing the dedication. You're just changing what it is. So that would be
No.
possible.
So maybe
We
we,
have Nelson Sitting Park.
Exactly.
yeah.
How about Nelson Playing Park and Nelson Park?
Exactly.
Nelson
That's kind
Sitting
of
Park
what,
actually
that's kind of
there's
what I'm
a-
thinking.
Between there, but yeah.
Yeah.
That would
That's
be
kind of
fine.
that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? So.
Because that really is all it's used for,
Right.
100% that
Exactly.
section.
Yeah. Right,
That's a-
that's kind of my plan. That was.
Yeah, the other one that's just a playground area, the other two where it's a majority don't qualify for this anyway, so.
Right.
it's not a-
And then the Triangle Park is purely
Yeah,
a playground.
Exactly.
Purely a
That's what I'm
playground.
talking
So
about.
that's,
The
that's.
Triangle Park is too far away from Upper Croton.
no, it can actually, yeah.
It is.
Oh, so
It would
then
be
it is,
within-
it would be
It
within,
that would be within, that would be
Right.
1,000 feet. Upper.
okay.
Yeah. That's the other one for me that comes into play
Okay,
from there.
all right,
So,
what else?
last comment, can we add the same 1,000-foot criteria on the vape shops or on Parkland, the parks?
In the parks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
I'm good, it's fine. We're trying to have the right number, but not.
Vapes aren't good for you either.
Um,
Really not good. What is, the Village Center, where does that stop vis-a-vis Spring Street? Like, what, because there's retail going down Spring Street.
I believe Broad Street is.
Broad is the, okay.
Yeah, just a little past, so
But you've got churches, you've got Sitting Park,
yeah,
you've got,
but when we do 34 state, oh, that's state, not spring. We have to predict that some retail will be actually put in that currently there isn't retail. We have to think in the future, not at the present.
Right, and 34 State Street is in the PWC, which is Planned Waterfront Central, and that one right now we have it as not permitted for.
Okay, so.
Or-
yeah, there's a children's center,
Right.
there's
And you're doing, and you're talking about spring.
even past Broad, there's retail, but,
yeah, so all of Spring Street past Broad and James, and Edward, that's all in the T zone, so that's residential.
And church.
mm.
What I can do is we can put together like a very quick map of.
Maps
Yeah, absolutely.
run
And
that.
then, because this was for discussion purposes, and then we'll put it into a local law. So when it comes back to you for a local law, you'll have a map, and then that way you can definitely, if there's any changes you want to make, we can make it at that time.
So just so I'm clear about like youth programs in parks, there are two, maybe three after-school program type places. You've got LaGrare with the ballet, Risco with all the kids, and what is the name? Where Kemi has.
A music store would qualify as a youth.
No, I know, but they actually teach. They have an after school,
Yeah, they
they have a
do.
camp.
Kimmy's
So-
not at Horak anymore, though.
Okay, Horak,
She's not,
that's
yeah.
what I
Not
wanted
there,
to say.
yeah.
I
Not
wanted-
there anymore.
I just wanted to say Horak, that's what, I forgot the name. So that doesn't qualify either. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the
It's a
state,
church, but
the state's public youth facility definition is a location or structure owned by a government or government subdivision or agency
Oh,
that is accessible to the public where the primary purpose
Got
is
it.
to provide. So,
got it,
yeah.
got it. Okay,
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
looks good.
Thank you, Valerie.
Do you need me for this next
Um,
one?
I don't.
Okay.
I know you're. I know it's
Thanks,
very late.
Valerie.
All right, thank you.
So, Valerie just asked me because she has been very helpful with this, but, in conjunction with the multimodal transportation hub, we have, we are required to, reach out to the State Historic Preservation Office, known as SHPO. And, they, given the proximity of the, multimodal hub to the aqueduct, they do have, we've been working with them on a letter of resolution that really helps to ensure that we won't be doing any damage to the aqueduct and we'll be respectful of it. But they were they actually came out and walked the site with us. So we not only did the people from SHPO do that, but Linda Cooper, who runs New York State Parks, and Steve Oakes, who is the director of the Old Croton Aqueduct Association, came. And we work with them fairly often on different things, given the prominence of the aqueduct in Austin's downtown. But we walked the site with them. They had originally sent an LOR that really didn't make a lot of sense. They didn't really understand the site. So we had them physically here, and they were able to understand what we're doing. And we worked with them, and this is the revised letter of resolution that we worked on with them. So it does have some stipulations which were discussed with them. The existing interpretive display, and that refers to the museum that we have at the rec center, the old Aqueduct Museum. They would like, us to work with them to update some of the things that were done, because those things were done probably, I want to say, in the 90s. So they're a little dated. So the elements from that, to work with them to update them. And then we talked about, could they be on walls in the new center and, in the main area, in the new community center? Could we have them laminated in some way and made signs for outdoors? So that's something that is an ongoing discussion, but that's something that we talked about. And then a construction protection plan. This is probably the most important piece, and we've already provided that to them. That really just is the contractor's plan to make sure that we're not impinging on the aqueduct in any way or causing it any harm during the course of construction. They want to review our landscape plans when we get to that point. And that's, so we will be forwarding those things to them, and they'll review it and have some input. They really are pretty easy to work with. And then the sponsor would like to fund the development of an educational program with us, which could be a pamphlet or some sort of presentation. Maybe it's something that lives, I mean, in this day and age, is probably better than a pamphlet, like something that can live online, that we would work with to them to produce. There have been many projects that we've worked with. In fact, the original museum was done by Natalie McIntosh, who at the time, I believe, was the assistant village manager here. And I don't know, Dana, if you knew Natalie, but I knew, I had the pleasure of knowing Natalie. She passed away at the ripe old age of 95 this year. So, but she had been very involved and was very instrumental in creating that museum. That's now not really used particularly much in conjunction with the Sing Sing Prison Museum at the rec center. So I think these are things that we can easily accomplish with them, and would be value adds too, because we really are looking to feature the aqueduct as an asset with the bike facility next to it and everything. So.
Yeah, my only concern is when we talk about working with, all I'm hearing is work that our staff's doing and we're gonna pay for it. So I want it to look nice, but it's like state areas basically downstreaming everything to our staff, and I'm not sure how much of us is in that conversation. It's these are the kind of things that always end up costing more and taking more time than anyone realizes.
I think it's something that we can talk about. The way this is written is not particularly specific. We did talk to them about that. I think the value proposition for the village is it behooves us to make better use of the aqueduct as a primary outdoor asset here. So the things that we're doing, yes, one could argue, would the state do them? But then the question is, would the state do them? And they may not do them, and they haven't done anything with any of this stuff in almost over 30 years. So again, and I had talked with Valerie about this, it's likely that this is work that can be done with our local historians, because we already have Scott Craven, who gives tours of the Weir Chamber, and we certainly have ample input from people who have worked as historians or currently historians who could help with this. And then it would be vetted by somebody who's, registered
Okay.
with them. But I don't think there's like any real downside to this. And considering what they originally asked us to do, this is not as much.
All right, any questions?
No, I dealt with them on when we did the docs down the shed. It's same kind of a conversation.
Okay.
No.
We could do something with you definitely repurpose.
You could definitely repurpose portions of that aqueduct museum. I mean, you can look at what we did down on in the ice cream kiosk down at the waterfront, where it's just panels.
Right.
There's a lot of fun stuff in that little museum, but some of it's you're not gonna really be able to translate it. But then there's plenty of plaques and stuff that you could do something with.
And that was really basically what we talked about. So these aren't things that are an inordinate amount of time, and they do tend to be things that people who specialize in history like to get involved.
I mean, the other thing you can do is we have that plaque along the trail as you go toward Main Street, that old one, which is, can barely read it, but you could create 3 of those along there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly.
then people can just read it. there.
P-Town,
Yeah.
actually, on the easy trail, the one Rika likes to take, while everybody else does this grown-up trail, they actually have plaques, one after the other, about the birds or whatever, but it actually works out nicely. It looks nice, actually. So something to think about. Okay, what else?
That is everything. So this will be on, we'll have the resolution on, this letter of resolution on next week's agenda for the board to vote on to allow me to sign it, and then we'll get that off to SHPO. And that concludes, our.
Okay.
meeting
I
for
sent
tonight.
you the verbiage for the resolution on Route 133.
Yes,
That to be sent to like 3 or 4 different
yeah,
government.
Amy did that this morning. You wanted it done by
Did
12.
she sign it with my signature? Did somebody
Yeah.
actually send?
I
Yep.
did your electronic signature. It was sent, the board was copied.
Okay, I didn't look at my emails after
Okay,
certain.
sure.
I had too much going on, so yay. Okay, I just need to send it to some people that were interested in that. Okay,
All right.
everybody good? All right. Stuart?
Thank you all.
Yeah,
So moved.
Second.
okay, folks. Bye.
Bye.
It's 9:55. We will see everybody next Wednesday at the courthouse for legislative sessions. You will be out of town. Okay, we'll still have a quorum. Yeah, what? No? Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Bob will be by Zoom.
I will send an email saying when
Great.
All right.
He's.
will you be sending an email to us?